Hello and welcome to ProLife Primetime News. Today is Friday, May 12th. I'm Leslie Palma.
And I'm Teresa Watson. In our top story tonight, we'll tell you about a pro-life victory in Ohio and what it might mean for abortion in the state.
Donald Trump did a town hall meeting with CNN this week. Teresa will give you the highlights and political news in a nutshell.
Leslie will catch you up on the latest salvo in the legal battle over the chemical abortion drug mifepristone in Abortion in the News.
Today is the final day of National Nurses Week, and we'll talk to Nancy Valco, a spokeswoman for the National Association of Pro-Life Nurses.
Sunday is Mother's Day, and Leslie and I are both moms, so we'll end the show bragging about our kids, and we might even mention our grandsons. We'll be hurt if you don't stay tuned.
The Ohio House and Senate have passed a proposal calling for a special election in August that asks voters whether the state should require a 60% supermajority to amend the state's constitution. If the measure passes in August, it could help defeat a pro-abortion ballot amendment that will be voted on during the general election in November. That amendment would enshrine the right to an abortion in the state constitution. The 62-37 House vote on Wednesday took place as hundreds of protesters demonstrated in the rotunda of the State House, and after House Democrats stood and started a chant against the vote that ended up with the gallery being cleared. Priests for Life's Brian Kemper, coordinator of street activism, was there for the whole crazy day, and he's here to talk about it with us. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Leslie, how we doing today?
Pretty good, pretty good. So there's a couple things I want to get to, but tell us about your day Wednesday at the State House. What went on there?
Well, I got there early, about 10 a.m. to meet up with several of our coalition partners, Mark Harrington from Created Equal, Laura Streethouse from Cincinnati Right to Life, and many others. And we went into the State House about 12:30 to get in line to be in the gallery for the vote today, yesterday. And like you said, there were several hundred people there. We went into the gallery, and as they started to discuss this bill, several of the Democrat House members stood up and started chanting, one person, one vote, trying to make it look like we were trying to say that something different than what democracy is, one person, one vote. And some of their people started standing up and chanting, and the whole gallery was cleared out. It took about 15, 20 minutes for them to get us all out. And then the pro boards continued to scream and chant as loud as they could in the rotunda, trying to drown out or get their sound into the chamber.
Wow. And the day actually started, you were there for a rally outside in the morning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's where the meeting place where we discussed what's going on with everybody that came. Lots of people came from all over the state to be there, wearing our Save the Ohio Constitution T-shirts and to be there for the vote. We knew that this vote was key. It was very essential for us to be able to raise that threshold to 60%. And in all reality, Leslie, it should be on either side that's something that we should want is a higher majority to actually add or change the constitution of a state. 43 states have 60% or higher threshold to meet. And so we don't think that that's something that's crazy here in Ohio. It's something that should be there.
And now there was also something called a decline to sign rally. What was that? What was that about?
Well, decline to sign is something that we are doing, that we are going around the state. There are people that have been paid to come into the state of Ohio to collect signatures. And what they're doing is they're approaching people like, oh, it's just to say that you believe in choice, or, oh, if you don't. Yesterday, I watched a man actually tell people that it's illegal for doctors now to help someone that has an ectopic pregnancy. So they're using lies and they're using manipulations to get people to sign this petition, which actually will cement abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy in our Constitution and also take away parents' rights. So we go around when people are asking for signatures and try to inform people what the truth is before they sign the petition.
Well, I know that you gave two of them an interesting day earlier in the week. Tell us about what you did in Troy, Ohio.
Well, it was kind of funny because it was a friend of mine who's a tattoo artist. They approached him and tried to get him to sign. And he immediately texted me and said, hey, you might want to come downtown, which, it's a small town. So sure enough, there were 3 of them trying to lie to people and collect signatures that for stuff that wasn't true. And so I went around and basically informed everyone that they talked to afterwards what the truth was, and not a single person signed while I was there. And in fact, they called the police on me twice. Both times were informed that I was just doing the same thing that they're doing, informing the public, nothing else,
Mhm.
and that I had every right to do that. And they ended up giving up and leaving for the day.
And how many signatures did they get that day?
I don't know what they got before me, but while I was around, not a single one.
None. Oh, that's great. Great work. So I understand
Here's
also.
something, Leslie, I hadn't even told you yet. They
Oh,
approached that same day, about 2 hours before I reached them. I just found out yesterday. They approached my 12-year-old son trying to get him to sign. Emmerich.
wow.
Yes. He's obviously 12 years old.
12 years old. Wow,
And
that's
they
incredible.
twice he was approached by the same person. They don't even remember who they approached and asked to sign this petition. And he just looked at him and said, "Do you know who my dad is?" and ran off.
That's fantastic. So a lot of pro-life groups in Ohio have come together in a coalition to fight this. Is there a central place where people can go to find out information, or how should
Protect
we
Women
help them?
Ohio. Protect Women Ohio is the best website to go to for that and get information.
ProtectWomenOhio.com.
Yes,
Mhm.
protectwomenohio.com. We'll be putting a social media toolbox up soon, different things that are going on, but all the information you need is there. And especially if you're in Ohio, hey, get a hold of us. Find out how you can get involved. And if you have family and friends in Ohio that you believe it's important to protect all human life, especially those in the womb that are in danger, then it's time to get involved in this campaign.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Brian. Thanks for everything you did this week, and keep up the good work.
Absolutely. And you'll have lots more reports coming soon from me.
All right. Great. Thanks.
Former President Donald Trump on Wednesday answered questions at a town hall meeting in New Hampshire that was broadcast by CNN. He chose a network that has been openly hostile to him in an effort to pick up supporters outside his conservative base. Trump celebrated the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade and called the Dobbs decision a great victory for pro-life Americans. Quote, "It was such a great victory, and people are starting to understand it now. For 50 years, this has been going on. I was able to do it, and I was very honored to do it." End quote. Trump noted that he nominated 3 of the Supreme Court justices who issued the 5-3 ruling, including Justices Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch, and Amy Coney Barrett. The former president condemned Democrats for supporting abortions up to birth. "They will kill the baby in the 9th month," he said. Trump supporters said the town hall was a huge success for the former president, while his detractors are furious with CNN for giving him the platform. Earlier this week, Trump was found liable in a civil case for sexually abusing and defaming writer E. Jean Carroll, with the jury awarding her $5 million in damages. Trump has filed an appeal. A poll released by the Washington Post and ABC News on Sunday shows Joe Biden's approval ratings have slipped to a new low, with Americans worried about his mental fitness. Just 36% of those polled approved of Biden's job performance, down from 42% in February. Of the 56% of those who disapprove, 47% disapprove strongly. 63% of respondents said Biden does not have the mental sharpness to serve as president for 4 more years. Asked about Trump's fitness, 54% of Americans believe he is mentally fit for office, and 64% say he is physically up to the task. California Senator Dianne Feinstein returned to Washington Wednesday for the first time since mid-February. The 89-year-old Democrat said she is still recovering from shingles and has been advised by doctors to work a lighter schedule. Feinstein sits on the powerful Senate Judiciary Committee, and some fellow Democrats believe she should have resigned rather than allow her absence to hold up the confirmation of Biden's nominees to the federal bench. Earlier this year, she announced that she would not seek re-election in 2024. No Labels, a unity party hoping to run a Democrat and a Republican on the same ticket in 2024, has been ordered to cease and desist from its efforts to enroll Maine residents in the party. Secretary of State Shanna Bellows said people are complaining that they are asked to sign a petition only to learn later they had registered for a political party. Bellows also sent a letter to 6,000 voters who enrolled in the party to say if they intended to enroll, no action is required. But if they did not intend to join, no labels, they need to contact their municipal office to fill out a new voter registration card. The polls are open for early voters in Kentucky's upcoming primary election on Tuesday. Polls throughout the state will be open through tomorrow for all registered voters registered with a party. The governor's race has the highest profile, with 12 Republicans vying for the nomination and 2 challengers facing off against incumbent Democrat Andy Beshear. And that's political news in a nutshell.
Abortion sellers in Virginia, Kansas, and Montana filed a lawsuit Monday in an effort to force the Federal Food and Drug Administration to drop several restrictions on how the abortion pill mifepristone can be prescribed. But what they really want is a court order protecting mifepristone access in their states, even if a different court blocks access to the drug. Next Wednesday, a 3-judge panel of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals will hear arguments in a separate case filed in Texas by the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine that seeks to invalidate the FDA's approval of mifepristone in 2000. Judge Matthew Kaczmarek ruled in the Alliance's favor, which would have halted access to the drug while the case continues, but the U.S. Supreme Court stepped in to block Kaczmarek's order until the Fifth Circuit issues its ruling. Pro-aborts and their media henchmen lost their collective mind this week when it was revealed that the 3 judges who will hear the case are all pro-life Trump appointees. But whichever side loses in the Fifth Circuit can request a hearing before the full court, so this case will not be winding down anytime soon. Voters in San Antonio, the second biggest city in Texas, voted down a proposal to block enforcement of the state's near-total ban on abortion. Another measure in the special election would have decriminalized marijuana in the city, but after the police union came out against the measure, voters rejected it by a margin of 72 to 28%. Washington State's outgoing governor, Democrat Jay Inslee, signed a law this week that allows minor children to hide out in youth shelters, even if they have not fled their homes because of abuse. And shelter officials also have been empowered to take minors for abortions or sex change surgeries without notifying their parents. Also in abortion-friendly Washington, the state budget includes $21 million for abortion infrastructure. The money will be used to pay salaries for abortion providers, treatment for out-of-state patients, medical personnel training, and security improvements at abortion businesses. Phil Scott, the pro-abortion governor of Vermont, signed a first-in-the-nation law this week that protects access to the abortion drug mifepristone, even if the FDA is forced to withdraw its approval of the drug. So just to be clear, the new law would allow the state to break the law. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, a Democrat, is continuing to appeal to lawmakers to change their vote on a 12-week abortion ban passed by the House and Senate last week. Cooper will veto the law, but that should be an empty gesture because both chambers have a veto-proof supermajority. The National Abortion Federation released a report yesterday claiming that violence against abortion providers skyrocketed in 2022. Every mainstream media reported on it, noting that arsons at abortion businesses doubled from 2 to 4, and that there were 9 assaults against abortion activists. But as Life News pointed out, there were 10 arson fires reported at pro-life facilities, at least 20 attacks on pro-lifers, including an 84-year-old woman who was shot in Michigan. But although the media has mostly ignored more than 200 attacks on pregnancy centers, churches, and pro-life offices, FBI Director Christopher Wray in November told a U.S. Senate committee that most of the abortion-related attacks in 2022 were against pro-life organizations. Pregnancy resource centers will be able to share in $20 million set aside for them in the Tennessee budget. Centers can apply for grants for mental health and counseling services, support for adoption, and housing and workforce assistance. Anastasia Gilley, a Florida woman who was 4 months pregnant and had been missing for a week, was found dead in Headland, Alabama. Marquis Devin McLeod, 33, of Alabama, was arrested on a charge of capital murder during a first-degree kidnapping. It's not known if he is the father of the 19-year-old's baby, but when pregnant women are murdered, it is most often at the hands of men who don't want to be fathers. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, homicide is the #1 cause of death of pregnant women. And finally, half of the rap duo Salt and Peppa said she was encouraged by a record executive to have an abortion to prevent a baby from getting in the way of her career. I don't think I ever said this out loud, but I was asked to have an abortion. I won't say by who, said Cheryl James, the Salt of the pair. She refused to abort her baby and now says, having my daughter was, besides finding Jesus, the best thing that I've ever experienced. I needed that little baby in my life. You know, she kept me company on the road. And that's abortion in the news. Every year, the week of May 6th to May 12th is designated National Nurses Week. And it ends on the 12th because that's the birthday of Florence Nightingale, probably the nation's most famous nurse. This year's theme is Nurses Make a Difference Anytime, Anywhere, Always. So to help celebrate this week, we've invited on a spokeswoman for the National Association of Pro-Life Nurses. Welcome, Nancy Valco.
Thank you for having me, Leslie.
Hi, Nancy. So I understand that you're also, I think you said you're also on the board of the association?
Yes, and I've been with them almost from the very beginning, from the 1970s. We've been around for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so tell me about how it got started. I think it was in 1978 or thereabouts.
That's when we got a charter. Mm-hmm. And we started it basically with just a few nurses, and then we've added on since then. We've had different directors and people that are there. But our mission has always been the same, is to support nurses, ethical standards, help them out, whatever we can do, and mostly inform nurses because, as you probably know, the American Nurses Association does take different positions than we do on things like assisted suicide, abortion, and voluntary stopping of eating and drinking. So we cover everything from the beginning of life till the end, always upholding the principle that life is valuable at whatever stage and whatever vulnerability.
Mm-hmm. So I was reading some of the information that you sent me, and in I think it was 1995, that other nursing association, what is it, the American Association?
American Nurses Association.
They actually came out against a ban on partial birth abortion. Is that right?
Yes. That is so tragic, and they are very much not pro-life, and that has been a problem. And they tell people they're speaking for nurses, but actually only a very small percentage of nurses belong to the American Nurses Association. Mm-hmm. And I have actually been interviewed by them and in the American Journal of Nursing and brought up different things. It's really been a problem, and they've been coming up with position papers, which I keep track of. Mm-hmm. And I've refuted those in my blogs.
Are they pretty much across the board pro-abortion?
Well, they're neutral on assisted suicide, but like on voluntary stopping of eating and drinking, and even with assisted suicide where it's legal, with the nurses, they do say we can refuse to do it, but we must make sure that care is still being given and that the patient is not abandoned. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's kind of crazy. If we refuse to do it, we should be able to refuse to do that, and with abortion. And it's been a problem, and they've had nurses who have had to sue, particularly in abortion. But their position does not help those of us in the field. And I've worked in almost every single, over 50 years, every single type of nursing. And there are ethical problems with all of them. And we are there to help with that. We have legal resources. I do consultations for the Life Legal Defense Fund. Actually, I helped to write an amicus brief in the Supreme Court case, Valco versus Quill, where the court was ruling that there can be a ban in New York on assisted suicide. And it went up to the Supreme Court. A nurse lawyer and I wrote a brief, and we won in the Supreme Court 9-0.
Oh, wow.
And they're still trying to get it through New York, and they still can't get it through.
Yeah, which is amazing because New York is so life unfriendly. So it's a victory.
I had to check this morning to see. They've got another bill up, but it hasn't gone anywhere. And a lot of what I do personally is travel around the country, a lot of times speaking on assisted suicide at different states and trying to convince the legislators and the people there that this is just a really bad idea. Mm-hmm. But nurses have even more problems with conscience rights. I was almost fired on a conscience rights problem. Oh. We had a gentleman who was 72 and had a problem during surgery. We brought him back. We had him on a ventilator. And when we took him off the sedation medication, he didn't wake up right away. So they called a neurologist who called him brain dead. I said, he's not brain dead. He breathes off the ventilator. And they said, oh, well, but he's brain dead. And I came in one night to find out that he had this very high morphine drip IV. Oh. and they had taken him off the ventilator. He was still breathing. And the nurse said, well, the doctor told us to keep increase the morphine until he stops breathing. And I said, that's euthanasia. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So I went up the chain of command. I turned it off. And I went up the chain of command, the supervisor, and they go, well, the doctor ordered, and it makes the family feel better. They were sitting around when they took him off the ventilator and he didn't stop. I said, this is absolutely wrong. So I called the doctor who did the surgery, who was pro-life, and I told him what was going on. And he goes, I don't want to get involved. I know what it feels like to be in that kind of position.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And when I told him what happened, and I didn't, and followed it up as much as I could, but I was working a night shift.
Mm-hmm.
Came back 2 days later, and of course he was dead. And I was called in the office, and they said the doctor that ordered it wants you fired.
Wow.
And I said, I did nothing wrong. And they said, well, you're a good nurse. How about if we just say we reprimanded you? I said, I will not accept it. At the time, I was a single parent with 3 children.
Oh,
and I thought, I don't know if I can sell shoes. And they said, well, how about if we give you, we just say we educated you? I said, I lecture on healthcare ethics. And they said, well, go away. We'll think of something. And interestingly, the story got around the hospital, and there had been other ethical problems. And people came up to me and they said, we know what happened with you. And a doctor ordered too much morphine. And as a nurse, we all went up to him and said, we're not going to give it. You give it. And he goes, I'm not going to give it.
Oh, wow.
And the practice was stopped. I thought I was going to lose my job. So one of my big things is conscience rights. We need to have nurses protected. And we had strong conscience rights when President Trump was in. He had a very strong thing where you could actually email your ethical problems, but that's all gone now.
Right.
But here in Missouri, we worked on it. We got the first Nurses Conscience Rights Act passed in the United States. That was back in the 90s. And that was a hard process. And they took away all the damages and stuff. It's a difficult thing. So I'm very interested in legally protecting us as much as possible. But nurses need to be supported. And that's what we're there for with National Association of Pro-Life Nurses. I'm also on the board of something called Healthcare Leadership Advocacy and Leadership Organization, HALO. And they have a lot of good information, even for lay people, on things like ventilators and right to die and stuff. And we have some very, very good resources. And with NAPN, we have a Facebook page and we have a website.
What's the website for the nurses group?
It's www.nursesforlife.com. We try to make things real simple.
Okay, but let's go back to conscience rights for a minute. I'm wondering what's happening now in the very pro-abortion states, New York, California, Illinois, Vermont, those things. Are nurses having a harder time asserting their conscience rights in these
it's a difficult situation, and nurses really are trying to stay out of it. So far, we've had some cases in the past before the current administration, and the nurses went to court and were upheld that they did not have to participate in it. In there's a lot of pressure. And what's such a shame is nursing is the most respected of all the professions. And one of the reasons we are is because we're not in it for money or anything prestige. We just want to take care of our patients. And that's why Florence Nightingale has always been our lodestar. We maintain the highest ethics. And like I said, it's important for everybody, because how can we trust our hospitals and our doctors if the ethics isn't there? So that's what we fight against. And with abortion, it's a problem. Disability, I got involved in the baby doe regulations when I had a daughter born with Down syndrome and a heart problem. And the doctor gave me the choice of not operating and letting her die since she had Down syndrome, even though there was an operation with an 80 to 90% effectiveness rate.
Wow.
So I know where people are, and I work a lot with disabled kids. I'm kind of semi-retired. I do a lot of volunteer work, but I babysit kids on ventilators, help families out. people at the end of life. And it's so wonderful what we nurses have to offer. And that's what we want to be there for. We want to be the support and give them the information and refer them if they need referral. And then I try with my blog to explain the latest things, because a lot of the stuff the media doesn't cover, I do. And it's been really interesting. I used to be a newspaper reporter on the
me
side
too.
for a national newspaper. I don't know. My parents wanted me to go into journalism rather than nursing. They felt it was one step above a domestic. But ever since I was 5, that's all I've ever wanted to do. And I don't regret a moment of doing it. And it's really important when I write. A lot of times I get the information before anyone else. And this is, I think, my experience as a newspaper reporter, and the national newspaper insisted on the very highest of journalistic ethics, to the point that sometimes when I wrote about controversial subjects, people said, well, what side are you on? I said, read the article. And finally, I came up with the idea. I asked my editor, I said, could I do an informational box with relevant quotations? And he goes, okay. And that solved the problem.
So where can we find your blog? Is that at nursesforlife.com?
Well, on Facebook, usually my blogs turn up there, but my webpage is www.nancyvalco, one word, NANCYVALKO.com. And that comes up right away. I actually have 2. One is for my older articles and interviews. I've been writing op-eds for newspapers, and I've written for many publications, Linacre Quarterly. I'm in academia. My papers are, I'm actually not a scholar. I don't have a whole bunch of degrees, but my stuff gets published. And I was actually asked to be on the editorial board of Academia at U.
Oh, that's great.
Which I don't want to do, but I'm very pleased that I was asked to do that. But my first husband, my late first husband, he was a researcher, and he couldn't write, but he was really good at researching. So he taught me how to write papers.
Oh, all right.
It's interesting.
Definitely. Well, I really thank you for coming on and for the work that you do. And I hope you're having a good time during National Nurses Week.
Oh, yes. And it's with Mother's Day, too. So there's nothing wrong with that. And I do encourage people. We do have a phone number on our website. And we do encourage people, contact us. You'll be more than happy to talk to you. A lot of times people are referred to me, and I have no problem with that since I'm semi-retired. But any questions or whatever, please feel free.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Leslie, for having me.
Good to see you.
Have a good day.
You
Bye.
too. Well, Teresa, Sunday is Mother's Day, and since we're both moms, I thought our viewers would forgive us if we talk a little bit about our kids. You go first.
How fun. I love it. So I am blessed with 2 sons. Liam, who lives in Oklahoma City with his girlfriend, and he works for a medical company. He's very successful. And my older son lives in San Diego with his beautiful wife, Kristen, and my new baby grandson, who turns a year next week.
So what's his name?
Caden James.
Caden James.
Yes. So very exciting, and they both have great jobs, and I'm a very proud mama. How about you?
Yeah, me too. So I have 3. My oldest son, Connor, lives in upstate New York, works for Spectrum Cable TV. He's married, his wife, Kaylin. They've been married, I guess, about 7 years, and they have a 2-year-old named Sage, who I'm not allowed to share pictures of on social media. And I have a son, Liam, also, and he lives in Brooklyn, works as an electrician. And my daughter, Hope, who was my unexpected pregnancy at 40, is a teacher in Philadelphia, and she's loving it and doing great. So I'm also a very, very proud mom and grandma. Grammy. What's your grandma name?
Grandma. I wanted to just be plain old grandma. So yes, and I've seen many pictures of Sage, and he is quite adorable. So, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, and happy Mother's Day to all of you. And also just keep in the back of your head that Mother's Day is a hard day for some women who have lost children to abortion or to miscarriage, or women who are not able to conceive. So, just keep that in the back of your head on Mother's Day. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us on Pro-Life Primetime News, produced at Priests for Life headquarters in Titusville, Florida. We hope you will tune in every Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
We hope you will support this show and all of our broadcasts by making a donation to prolifegift.org. These donations help fund all of our work here at Priests for Life, which enables us to continue educating, equipping, and activating God's people to end abortion. I'm Teresa Watson, Executive Manager.
I'm Leslie Palma, Communications Director. Remember, life is the only choice.